Right. Hi, I'm Julian, and today we're going to be running through the basics of removing and replacing a processor on an ATX motherboard. Alright, first thing you want to do is make sure everything's unplugged, everything's shut down and all that.
Make sure it's cool.
Yep. Make sure you leave plenty of time for the computer to cool down. Computers can get very hot over time. Afterwards, you're going to want to open up the case. This is a clamshell design. It's a bit different from a normal case, but in most cases you just take something on the sides, pull off the panel, and see the same basic parts. After that, you're going to unplug most everything from your motherboard to get it out of the way. I'll make sure you get all of the cords out of the way. You don't want anything coming into contact with the processor itself. Once inside the machine, it's a fairly simple matter to remove the heatsink. You'll be looking for anything large and square in metal like this. This is a very old computer with a very old motherboard. Most heatsinks nowadays will have fans on top of them. If it does, you'll want to unplug it from the motherboard. Once you remove the heatsink, you'll be able to see the processor. With most processors, there'll be a small lever holding it in place. For older styles like this, which is a low insertion force processor, the lever is used to hold the pins in the processor into the socket itself. With newer processors, the Intel Sandy Bridge uses a zero insertion force socket, which has a smaller processor with the pins on the motherboard and a small covering which will be deactivated when you pull the lever back. Now, when you grip a processor, you want to grip it by the sides. Make sure you do not touch these pins here. If any of these pins are bent, it will be completely destroyed, which, while you may be replacing it, you still don't want it to cause reckless damage.
No.
Now, once you've removed it, it's a fairly simple matter of putting the processor in. Because we don't have a spare on hand, we're just going to put the same one back into it. Simply orient it so that all the pins are lined up with all the pins down here.
Line the gold arrow.
You want to line the gold arrow up with the arrow on the motherboard. From there, simply ever so carefully lower the processor into the socket. Shouldn't require any force.
What about the thermal paste?
Then place the lever down. Now, for most processors, you want to put thermal paste on the contact point which they have designated. Because this is a dead processor, and it's just for example, we won't be removing or applying thermal paste. But you're going to want to make sure you start with a clean surface, so clean off your processor and heatsink using a very high concentration rubbing alcohol, and then apply the thermal paste smoothly and completely, spreading it with some sort of spreading tool. A credit card will work just fine for that.
Evenly.
After that, slip the heatsink back on, making sure you get everything aligned correctly. And for this, you'd use the latching mechanism which wraps around it and clicks right into place. After that, if your heatsink has a fan on it, simply reattach it to the points on the motherboard, plug everything back in, and start up your system. What you're going to want to do when you start up the system is be sure to enter the BIOS and check the CPU temperature. If it's raising too high, you might have messed up in either plugging in the heatsink or applying thermal paste. If that happens, immediately shut your computer down, unplug everything, wait for it to cool, then open the case back up, remove the heatsink, and try again. You do not want to leave your computer running if it's running hot. That can cause major damages to not only the processor, but potentially other parts of the machine as well.
New system.
After that, simply plug everything back in. Once you've made sure your computer is running correctly, should be set. I think that's about it.
And then, so just plug everything back in?
Yep.